Okay, I wanted to make a video right quick before I went to sleep. And I want to talk about the harsh reality of basically, I'm gonna turn it off as I don't really need that. It's not that hot up in here. The harsh reality of traditional recording versus modern recording. And I want to talk about, for a minute, when I grew up with the old R&B, blues, jazz days of the 70s and 80s. That we're talking groups like Earth, Wind and Fire, Doobie Brothers, what is it, Androza, Make a Wish, Baby. So those kind of songs, listening to the classic records, like even classic rock records like Def Leppard, Photograph, listening to Earth, Wind and Fire, growing up on, especially on the R&B side, Confunction, Luther Vandross, Stephanie Mills, and all those, the Star Point, Midnight Star, Cameo, Frankie Beverly and Maze. Just the list can go on and on and on. Even LTD or Me and Mrs. Jones. That's not LTD. That's what's his name? We got a thing going on. So anyhow, listen to artists like that. Renee and Angela. I can just, because there's literally hundreds of them, of artists, from Ashley and Simpson to you name it. And then I listen to a lot of crossover. I listen to Duran Duran. I listen to Mr. Mister. I listen to Men at Work. You come from a land down under. I listen to Phil Collins. Studio. Listening to Level 42. There's something about you. So just literally there was hundreds. I would probably say, from Michael Jackson to Madonna to Paula Abdul. And I'm naming all these artists because all these hundreds of artists, they went into hundreds of different studios and recordings were done the traditional way. You had so many different types of recording consoles. Most of them had Studer tape machines, or they had MCI tape machines, or they had Atari tape machines, or Tascam tape machines, or whatever the case. And the other common thing would be lots of different varieties of outboard gear. But that was traditional recording, especially recording to a tape machine. And back in the day, most people, when they had records, were recording with session musicians or bands. And so most of the music was comprised of always some sort of band. Most music just wasn't recording to sequenced tracks done from like digital synthesizers on multi-track DAWs and things like that. Just that really started becoming more in the late 80s, probably 90s, especially in certain music like R&B, where you have a producer like Teddy Riley with sequence and multi-track using just different varieties of synthesizers. But he still went and recorded all that to a multi-track tape machine like a Studer or whatever. They still did that. Versus recording into because DAWs they didn't really exist. Some DAWs you could do MIDI recording. That was pretty much it. There was no audio, there was no plugins. It didn't, this didn't become a big thing until late 90s, going to the 2000s and later, where you can do audio, where you can start recording your vocals, recording guitars into your DAW. Then you can start using plugins. Plugins have really only been around for about 20 something years. They're not. They're not. It's not old at all. Versus outboard gear has been around for at least 60 years. Plugins are fairly new, especially the plugins today. They're really literally only about 10 to 15 years of the plugins that we use today. They're pretty. They're not old at all. Modern recording itself is not really old at all. The way we're recording today. Today's recording consists of mainly just the DAW, or whatever DAW you're using, Pro Tools, Logic, or whatever you're using, Reaper, doesn't matter, Ableton Live, plugins, and then that's pretty much what most people are using, except they just, they get themselves some studio monitors, and then they're using the preamps in the interface, and that's the bulk of modern recording today. A few things that the studio itself is really the live room, and the control room is just really the space you're in. But because a lot of people have chosen to, build recording studios in their bedrooms or attics or basements or whatever, that's the space. Some people are going to acoustically treat their room with panels and bass traps and clouds and acoustic panels and things like that. But that's the space. And some people are some people are recording in a way that they're like, well, I don't really need a live room to capture that drum sound, because I am programming my drums using virtual drum programs that come in the DAW or a plug-in software, a virtual synth. And a lot of people are just using virtual synth instruments as well. I mean, the options for the computer and the software and all that has really expanded what people can do in their PC or Mac versus needing the traditional live room and control room. The old music, and the reason why I was mentioning all those older groups is because most music at the time comprised of comprised of recording either session musicians or bands. And session musicians are still musicians, they're just not in the band together. So, but that's, you basically recorded real drums, real bass guitar or bass synth, real guitars, synthesizers, whether analog or digital, and you recorded background vocals, horn sections, trumpet, trombone, saxophones mostly, and then maybe percussion instruments like bongos, congos, triangles for percussion, then the drum sets themselves. That's most of what all that music, if I listen to classic music, it doesn't matter if it's Earth, Wind & Fire or Frankie Beverly and Maze or whatever. You listen to those classic group music, there were bands. As music has moved into using more and more keyboards, all the sounds and drum patches that come from keyboards, virtual instruments. There's a lot of programs like Analog Lab 5 or Kontakt, Native Instruments. There's programs like that offer virtual instruments, and those programs would have, 20 different, 100 different drum sets. Or some people are even using drum modules like my MPC, or they're using drum modules like Lisa's D4 or whatever, to create their drum sounds, or their Akai or Roland to create their drum patches or whatever. There are so many virtual instruments using in the PC or Mac that is substituting a lot of what sounds that you would use from the typical band. A typical band would consist of your drums, your bass, guitar, organ, Wurlitzer, Rhodes, Hammond or whatever, grand piano, whatever, Maybe some violin or some guitar, electric guitar, maybe acoustic guitar, maybe some horns or whatever. And those were the traditional sounds of older classic music. But I think as we evolve to all the modern digital synth sounds, all the samples, all the modern sounds that we have, it's just changed. It's changed the need to do the traditional. You walk into like a studio like Blackbird out of Nashville, or East West out of in Los Angeles, or Hip Factory out of New York or whatever, or the Record Plant out of New York or whatever, or any of these traditional studios where you walk in and see the control room with the large console, a 2-inch tape machine, and all the outboard gear, and the big live room where they're going to record all the musicians or whatever. It's kind of eliminated that, because even if people record, they might partially still want to use a recording studio for that, to get certain sounds like drums or whatever. Most people can record in their bedrooms now. It's just a what people are doing, because one is so much cheaper. Now, there are a lot of people, they may not necessarily know exactly how to get the sounds they need, because maybe they're a novice at this, they're new to recording, simply because buying audio interfaces and studio monitors and getting a DAW and buying plugins and buying a few, easy affordable microphones and things like that. Most people can equip a home recording studio for $500 to a couple of $1,000, and they can have the bulk of everything they would need in their bedroom, other than, the acoustics or whatever. But the only difference between someone buying a couple of $1,000 worth of stuff and doing their bedroom, and maybe going to a traditional commercial studio with all this gear, would be knowledge. Now, a real outboard gear, a real console, does it make a difference? It can make a difference sonically to a point. But for the most part, if you have a person that's been have years of experience, and they know what they're doing, you're not going to hear too much of a big difference from the analog console and outboard gear and on a tape machine, versus if you did it in your DAW and used the mixer in your DAW and used plugins. You're not going to hear, not today. You would have heard a difference maybe 10, 15 years ago, but not today. But you will hear the difference if the person doesn't know what they're doing. So, to wrap it up on today's modern recording, that's just, and I've said this and I'll say it again and again and again. There are going to be a lot of people, and especially people that's been in the business 20, 30, 40 years, that are used to a console, tape machine, outboard gear. Being complacent is a comfortable place to be when you're used to doing things and it's easy for you and it feels comfortable for you. That's a hard thing to give up, to change. Change is a hard thing to change the way you're used to doing things for advanced things. It's like going to Atmos as an example. Atmos recording and mixing and all that, it takes a lot. Part of it is courage to make that jump. Some people embrace new technology and change. They just, oh man, I love being able to go into the box and just use plugins. some people embrace it. Other people just will not embrace it. They're like, I just can't do it. I got to have my real 1176 compressor. I got to have my real Pultec EQ. I have to have a real, I got that work. Some people just do not want to work that way. And I would say either way, neither way is wrong. It's just that I think, and this is in everything in life, sometimes a person that wants to embrace new ways of doing things, like I'm going to lose the console, I'm going to lose outboard gear, I'm just going to use just the mixing console in my DAW, I'm just going to use plugins, I'm just going to use an interface, and I'm just going to record this way and mix this way. And sometimes people that want to work that way can't understand why other people don't want to embrace it like they have. And it's the same thing, vice versa. It's like sometimes you can have people that have used to working on an SSL console. They love working on an SSL console. They love working with the tape machine. They love working with outboard gear. And they're like, I don't understand why a person would want to work just in the box. I love working on a console. I love patching in gear. I love having gear. I love touching real knobs. I love touching a real fader. I love being able to touch a real console. I don't understand why people don't want to work this way. And this is always going to be the struggle between, but the answer is really, really simple. This is the answer. The answer is everything in life. Why do people like Dodge Challengers or Charger Hellcats versus why do some people like the Mustang, a Mustang GT? Why do some people like a Corvette? Why do some people like Porsche 911s? Why do some people like the Acura NSX or whatever, or why do some people love photography and other people don't? Why do some people love, mustard on a hot dog versus some people only like ketchup on a hot dog? We're different. That's the answer. And we like what we like. Some people like the way, I would say some people love the way Jennifer Aniston looks. Other people don't think she's cute at all. We're different. What makes I think this is why we have all the problems that we have in the world all together, because really people that like certain things and other people that don't like what they like causes disagreement. I don't understand. And I'll try to use one more last analogy on this. It's kind of like when I was listening to, when they were doing an interview with Al Schmidt when he was alive, and he's a Neve guy. He loved Neve consoles. And he's not the only one. It makes you wonder. Al Schmidt was a big fan of like the Neve VR88s as an example. The modern Neve consoles versus the old traditional Neve, like an 8078 or 8048 or whatever, like the kind of console that Sylvia Massey owns, the kind of console that Andrew Sheps used to own. It's almost like, versus Al Schmidt said he don't like SSL boards at all. He said he won't even work on them. Versus Chrysler Algae and Bob Clearmountain and all the engineers that like Larrabee or the record plant, they all have SSL consoles. And Chrysler Algae loves his SSL. Al Schmidt, I don't know, 40, 50 Grammys. The amount of Grammys that Chrysler Algae has gotten, Al Schmidt was mixing on a Neve versus Chrysler Algae, who's got so many Grammys, who can count, that mixed on a an SSL. Why, if they're both getting amazing results? Now, Chris Lord-Alge said he never won't. Chris Lord-Alge said he doesn't never say he don't like Neves. It was only Al Smith that said he don't like SSL. But hundreds to thousands of people are using SSLs, and then there are lots of studios that use Neves. Why? My thought would be, as many Grammy Award-winning mixing engineers like Bob Clearmountain and Chris Lord-Alge, why is an SSL such a problem for Al? It didn't make any sense to me, and I couldn't figure that out. Then there is like I would say Alan Sides. They used to run Ocean Way, which used to be physically was next door to East West. Would have a Focusrite console in one room. Then there was a Neve in one room. He had an SSL in one room. He had multiple. And then the Blackbird's the same way. Blackbird has API Neve consoles and stuff like that in these different control rooms and the different studios down in Nashville. My thing is, why isn't one console the standard across the entire? It's like, what is, it's like you go to Cherokee Studios and they have a Trident in there. Or you go to Treasure Isle, they have a Trident. Or you go to certain studios, they have certain brands. Why is everyone so different with their consoles? It's the same thing with studio monitors. And that's what really brought me to making this video in the first place was, there's a guy on YouTube, his name's Coke Kaepernick, that was talking about, are NS10s even relevant today? And I made that point and said, really, they were relevant simply because of the styles of music that was being made at the time. Early, 70s, 80s, 90s. But as music became more digitally, more plug-in influence, more virtual instrument influence, especially with EDM, trap, techno music today, is a lot of it's bass, low-end heavy, and things like that. It's just with K-pop, Korean pop music, and all these different modern genres of music that have a lot of synths, and NS10s may not be the monitor of choice that you need to mix on those type of monitors. Classic rock records, R&B records, country because the genres have grown. It wasn't a huge amount of genres of music in the 70s like it is. Trap, hip hop, EDM, and all that wasn't really existed in the 70s. You had mainly R&B, rock, country, blues, jazz, but genres have grown, based on the newer genres of music. So all this is relevant to traditional recording and recording onto tape and through the console and outboard gear versus just recording in your room today, in your bedroom today. So I think that that's really what's really happening. Is there is people that really have not come to the realization that there are way more genres of music than they probably even listen to. You got a lot of people that are in the recording business that don't even listen to K-pop or maybe Indian music or or listen to modern EDM music or trap music or hip hop or whatever. They don't listen to that. They only will listen to classic country and western records, classic R&B, because they may not like the new stuff. And I'm talking about, these are people that are probably running your traditional commercial studios, and in their mindset, they might be thinking that their clients are always going to be these bands that want to come in and record your traditional Led Zeppelin, Beatles, or whatever styles of music or whatever the case may be, not realizing that, or they realize they know about modern music, but it's just not appealing to them. And so a lot of guys that even build studios, they still will even build a studio that still will have a traditional SSL, or Neve or an API or MCI console or whatever the case, a Neotech or whatever. There's literally hundreds of consoles. And we're still going to have the 2-inch tape machine, even though most of us are going to do Pro Tools, because that's what the client base, that's going to be because most clients are recording on DAWs or whatever. And that's how we're going to give them their session files or whatever. Whatever the case may be. But modern recording is the bedroom. It's the audio interface, maybe 8 channels of audio interface with 8 mic pre's, a Focusrite Scarlett or something. You're going to use the preamps in the interface, plugins, the DAW, microphone, studio monitors, maybe a MIDI controller, maybe like an MPC or whatever. That's modern recording. The space, especially depending on the style of music, just isn't needed for certain genres of music. Certain genres of music, it isn't needed. So then there are a lot of studio owners that, they realize, they probably have to come to realization that that's really, to sum it up, that's really the breakdown of my analogy of modern versus traditional recording. The music will always adapt and change. Think about that for a second. It's kind of like in the 40s when they were recording big band. They never thought big band would go away. Now there's nothing with big band being played on radio day unless you listen to a radio station that plays big band, like maybe on a XM Sirius channel that plays the old 1940s big band stuff. But other than that, your most modern channels on XM Sirius or Spotify, Spotify is basically, personal user streaming, is basically, what's the word I'm looking for when you create your playlist, type of internet service, versus or your traditional terrestrial radio, modern radio, or even music TV or whatever. They're not playing big band, but it's just one of those styles that is faded. It's like the 1950s styles of groups from the 50s. They just don't play that. You don't even play Motown era type of groups unless you listen to a channel that's specifically playing the Supremes or the Four Tops or Smokey Robinson and the Miracles or whatever. You're just not going to have that modern today. So it's gotten to the point where the traditional control room and live room in some instances is just not needed. And there are a lot of people that have not come into terms to understand that. And this is why there's such a fight with, when I get on there and some people's channels they're demonstrating an SSL channel strip, studio tape machine, and how you got to calibrate it, or an MCI, and there's just not very many people recording that way, and so And there are so many more benefits, and I can't stress it enough. The editing capabilities of what you can do in a DAW, you just can't do with tape. And even a lot of commercial studios that are still even running today, like Abbey Road or whatever, know this. This is why they all gotten Pro Tools rigs. Every one of them have gotten Pro Tools rigs, because they know that, you know, people just can't afford to do the tape way anymore. To spend $200 to $300 on a reel and only get 3 songs on a tape, or whatever the case, when you know that you can do a complete albums just recording to your hard disk in your Mac or PC through a DAW. It's people that don't want to change. And I get there. I can't, I don't want to go that way because the tape sounds better, or, whatever the case. And I'm just going to say it like this. I would say it like this. If I pull up, do some recording through the console, and I'm using my Antelope interface or whatever, or my Mark or the Unicorn interfaces or whatever, and I'm recording through the console and just recording into a DAW, and when I play back the tracks, I'm not hearing it sounding worse because I went that route over tape. I'm just not. I personally honestly believe that recording through your interface into a DAW sounds just as good as tape recording the traditional way. All the music that that's just, it can be people argue this to the cows fall from the sky. It's going to be that argument that tape or versus going to a DAW and through an interface. And that's the harsh reality between traditional recording and modern recording. And I've come to the terms that I don't think recording the DAW and the audio interface, which is modern recording, compared to traditional recording through a console and a tape machine, I don't think that the tape is better than the modern recording, and I don't think the modern recording to an interface through a DAW is better. I think they're just as equally as good, but I just think that the modern way we do things with DAW and all the capabilities and editing when it comes to that portion of recording is just rings around the traditional way. The traditional way was just limited, even down to track count, because you only had as many tracks as your console and your tape machine. DAWs give you way more options. Just way more options. Your DAWs are only limited to the limitations of your processing of your PC or Mac. If you have 40 tracks, it will play 40 tracks if your PC can handle it. And most PCs can, or Macs can handle it. So that's my take on it. So I'm done with the video. I just wanted to put my thoughts on modern recording versus traditional recording. And I think modern recording, just because of what you can do and all the capabilities and functions and editing, modern recording just has an edge. It does. Even though traditional recording sounds good, but modern recording not only sounds good, but you got more options. That's my take on it. So thanks for watching, and y'all have a great one.